kids who had gone to teen camp, and it's obviously the East Altar. I thought it was really spectacular. So I took a picture of it so I could show people what kind of stuff they do. Advocacy and social services. Lady Liberty League's been around for a while, and they do a lot of stuff. Um, I think they're open to, if you want to participate in them or learn about them. I think they're open to that. They're part of Circles program, one of Circles programs. There's an Earth Spirit Pagans in Colorado Springs. I do not know who those people are. Gaia Rising in Ohio. I don't know them either. The Lady Liberty League you see above. And Our Freedom, a Pagan Civil Rights Coalition, was going just great for a while, and we did a lot of good work. I was part of it, but the person who founded it passed away this summer, and it's reconstituting in another way, and that hasn't happened yet. Okay, I don't know what does this say. Advocacy. I don't know what it says at the top. Online materials, but these are some things that are offered to pagans who may be isolated and want to touch base with something. Um, oh, that's the other one. Abuse has plagued the pagan world in the past. I'm sorry to say, but it has, and I think secrecy fosters it. Mystery doesn't, but secrecy does. But Cherry Hill Seminary has a really cute little booklet. It's free for non-professionals to recognize how to recognize and respond to abuse. COG has one too that you can download from the COG website. I would say it's not as thorough as Cherry Hill's. They're both free though. Youth. Somewhere this says youth, I think scouting. At the top of the page. I can't see it. Um, Again, Pete Pathfinder was really prescient, I have to say. And he created the Spiral Scouts as an answer to scouting for people that didn't want to be connected with it, especially the Boy Scouts, the big uptight Boy Scouts, who are dying now anyway. But at the time, 1999, when Spiral Scouts was founded, that wasn't the case. And the Boy Scouts were very hostile to pagans of any stripe. But anyway, they have a great program. I don't know how active it is in different parts of the country, but I know it is active because they have a couple of different websites for different communities. And evidently they have a badge too, which is kind of cool. The Covenant of the Goddess offers a heart and crescent religion scouting badge. And it's for leaders. And then there's one for Over the Moon Award for children ages 7 to 11. And they're awarded to scout leaders who do cool things, who seem to merit it. We don't seek them. I happen to be in COG, so COG doesn't look for these people. They ask COG, and they say, the scouting troop will say, so and so has done such and such, and they deserve a reward, and we give it to them. There was one I remember in Portland where the guy this was not Spiral Scouts, but Boy Scouts. He had an inner city scout troop, in a sort of semi ghetto, and he got local camping stores, supply stores, to donate tents and other camping equipment and sleeping bags and so forth. And he took them out camping out in the woods. And I mean, a lot of them have never seen big woods, a lot of kids from inner cities. So I thought it was really great that he did that. And he was awarded the Heart and Crescent Award, the one that's on the left. So I think that's kind of cool. These are just recognition, but they're still nice. This is a Lammas altar that I happen to love. It's from a Gardnerian coven. Okay, libraries. That's a whole opening, growing area. Addisonton Research Library is in Albany, California, and you can look at their website. They have everything they have is listed. They have an inventory, so you can see what they have if you're a researcher, but you can't take the books. So if you want to use anything that they have and it's nowhere else, you can go to the library, you can make an appointment, and they'll let you in, and you can read the thing as much as you want, but you can't take them out of the library. The Valdosta State University Archives and Special Collections in Valdosta, Georgia, has been looking for pagan stuff, and they have some, but I don't know how much, and I don't think very many pagans are aware that they're there. The Institute for the Study of Religions at UC Santa Barbara was founded by this man whose picture is on the right. His name is J. Gordon Melton. Way back, I'd say late 80s maybe. And he has a ton of personal papers. And particularly, I know that Aidan Kelly's archives are there, and so are Isaac Bonowitz's. I don't know if you people in Northwest are aware who Aidan Kelly is, but he's one of the founders of a tradition called Nerude, which is New Reformed Orthodox Order of the Golden Dawn. It came out of the Bay Area, but there are some elsewhere. There's some convents elsewhere, and it still exists. But it's a bootstrap. It was made. Nerude was created for a poetry class that somebody was taking with James Broughton at San Francisco State, and the project that this woman did was to write a ritual that witches would have used. So they did a lot of research, and they cooked up a ritual. It's not strictly speaking as I mean, it has the same quarters as most of us have, but it's got some differences that are kind of cool and specific to them. But they did it once for the class, and they said, "This is really great. Let's do it again." So they did it a couple more times, and then they started to form covens, and now it's a thriving, albeit localized and small, tradition. The Graduate Theological Seminary Library in Berkeley is pretty extensive too. There are 9 seminaries that are affiliated with that, from liberal to not liberal, but Starhawk's archives happen to be there. Then the one that I really like is the New Alexandrian Library in Delaware. It's a purpose-built library. You can see how cool looking it is. I did have some pictures of the inside, but I didn't put them in here. It's all temperature controlled and moisture controlled and the whole bit, just like fancy university archives. And that's where my stuff is going. And they will accept, particularly, the one thing they're not getting is ephemera, which are like programs of festivals or events, flyers, that kind of stuff. But they have a lot of it now because I've sent a lot of them. And then the New Alexandria Library in Minneapolis is currently in storage because they lost their space, but it does exist. But these are all efforts by pagans who value book learning and other stuff that we have produced, who want to have a permanent housing for it all. So that's where my stuff is. I've sent them several boxes. Military and law enforcement. There's a military pagan network out of Maryland, was founded in 1992. As far as I know, it's still functioning. The same with the Officers of Avalon. They both, as you can see, have crests of their own. The Order of Paladins is a Wiccan order of knighthood. It's specifically Wiccan. I think Kerr Cahulan is the one who runs that. And then the Sacred Well Congregation is an international Wiccan church and fellowship, which is mostly on military bases. And you may remember about 10 or 15 years ago, there was a big hoop-de-doo about a Wiccan circle that was circling at, I think, Fort Hood. They were circling on this army base. And it caused a lot of freakouts on the part of Southern conservatives. And George Bush, who was the president at the time, said it wasn't a religion and all that sort of stuff. Well, Sacred Well went to bat for them, and it is now recognized by the military as well as a lot of other institutions. But that the founder of that is a guy named David Orringdorf, and he was a career military intelligence officer. He's retired now, and he has a PhD in psychology, and he teaches at Cherry Hill Seminary. So it's they're pretty organized. And I find that military and prisons, they both really want rules and regulations. I'm from a kind of more inspirational kind of trad, and you speak as the spirit moves you, more or less. I mean, within forms. But these are very specific. Every ritual is written out to the nth degree. but nothing wrong with it. It's just different. But COG has a military service award, and they've given it to lots of people, and so does Circle. So if you know any pagans who are in the military and want a service award, or think you think they're worthy of it, just they don't have to accomplish anything except for having served. Um, let COG know. Here's the big one that I'm dealing with these days: prison chaplaincy programs. The Appalachian Pagan Ministry serves 3 states, I think. I don't know what I have here about Ohio and West Virginia, but I think they also have Western Pennsylvania. And they've been doing it for a long time. They're self-supporting. They always need money. They're very nice people and they're very dedicated. It's not an easy thing to be a prison volunteer. You have a lot of restrictions, which are very frustrating, I can say, because I've been doing it. Um, and the Appalachian Pagan Ministry has a manual for prisoners, not for people who volunteer, which I haven't seen yet, but I plan to. Another one that's a big deal. Again, I'm back to Pete Pathfinder and his prescience. He founded the Mother Earth Ministries, and that's based in Tucson, and that's where they serve. They serve in the Tucson area. But they published a book, as you can see, called Enchantment Unencumbered, which I just got in the mail this week, so I haven't really gotten familiar with it. But they've been doing it for a long time. They have a ton of resources on their website, a ton of really valuable resources if you're inclined to explore that, to look into prison ministry. And if you do, I'm telling you, they are so grateful for anything by way of volunteers. The Temple of Witchcraft has people who go to prisons in New Hampshire. I don't know how regular it is. They use this book, Penzak's Inner Temple of Witchcraft book, which he sent me a copy of when I was first going to go into San Quentin for us to use. But that's the one they use. And I know that there are people, do I have it in here? Yeah. There are other pagan ministries. The ADF White Mountain Druid Sanctuary has 4 volunteers who work with inmates in a prison in Eastern Washington, but they don't have a formal program or materials. They did one of their big coups a couple years ago. Is they did a Samhain with the Asatru and the Druids and the Wiccans, all of whom were incarcerated in the same institution. So they shared their celebration of Samhain. There's a pagan prison ministry meetup group in Seattle, and I have no idea if they're active or not. I don't think they are. But somebody started to do it anyway. The Troth has a regular volunteer in Southern California, and I know that Diana Paxson, on behalf of the Troth, visits 1 or 2 prisons, federal prisons here in California, maybe once or twice a year, which is way less commitment. And these prisons are in the middle of nowhere. Most prisons are in the middle of nowhere. So there's not much opportunity to maintain connections with family and friends or communities. And there's not much, it's harder for people to visit, you know. So she goes to those that are far away from the Bay Area. She lives here in the Bay Area where I am. And they pay for her overhead, you know, for motel and food and gas, which is pretty amazing. That, again, is a federal prison. Massachusetts has some volunteers that I'm aware of, but it's irregular. They're personal things where they will go for whatever. And I've started a pagan inmate ministry Facebook page, a secret one, which has almost all these people I'm talking about are on it. And it also includes pagans who, at least one who was a pagan before he went into prison and is a pagan still, and he has sort of the inside perspective on what's being done there. So we have a couple of resources for them. Ardentane recently published this Learning Wicca. It's about a 30-page or so opening introductory thing for witchcraft. Is pretty nice, and they give it away. So if a prisoner asks for it, they'll send it to them. But they don't know who to give it to otherwise. They don't market it. The Cherry Hill Seminary again has a Pagan Life Academy, which is print lessons for incarcerated pagans. It's sort of pan-pagan in its approach. And there's 8 different issues, lesson plans or whatever, one for each Sabbath. And they're $5. And a lot of prisoners are asking for them. They pay $5 and they get one or another or all 8 of them. You know, you can get all 8 of them for what? 30, $40. They can do it gradually. Anyway, they're being well received in prisons. Then I found this book online, The Pagan Prison Ministry, by a guy named Charles Butler, also Nito. I never heard of him. I don't know anyone who's ever. I'm relatively well networked, so I've asked around, and people don't know who he is. And I looked for it again just before this presentation for this book by exact name and everything, and it's not out there, at least online. It's not there anymore. So you have to rely on these other ones. That one, and that one, and the one that Cherry Hill has. That one, and the one that Argentine has. One of the things that's different about prison, I volunteer at San Quentin State Prison. I've been there for about 7 years. Heaven knows when I'm ever going to get in again because of the COVID thing. But I didn't know what I was doing. I went as a volunteer, and they had done a spell to find somebody on the outside, because whatever activity the inmates are doing, it benefits from having an outside person, kind of an ombuds person or something. Anyway, so I go in there. Another thing that has changed a lot, of course, the prison population is disproportionately people of color, people with mental illness, addicts, even immigrants. So it's not, it doesn't reflect the same demographic as on the outside. However, it used to be, there's all kinds of religions that are taught or given opportunities to share their worship together in prisons and in mental hospitals that I know of. And some of the inmates are already a Satur or Druid or Wiccan or whatever before they come in, which was the case with 1 or 2 of my guys. But generally, it's new to them, for them. They're just exploring. That makes it different too. And there's like about 6 or 7 chaplains who are hired by the prison. There's an imam, there's a rabbi, and there's a Native American guy, and so forth. And if you're a volunteer, you have to be sponsored by one of those paid chaplains. So I've been sponsored. First, I was sponsored by the Jewish chaplain, and then by the Native American chaplain, and then most recently by the Catholic chaplain, who's been just wonderful to work with, really very accommodating. But there's so many things that we just take for granted out here that aren't possible to do in a prison. I'll tell you a little bit more about them. Go back. San Quentin is in the Bay Area, which means it's accessible to a lot of people, a big population. It's on a peninsula that sticks out into San Francisco Bay. It's a beautiful site, and there have been huge efforts to get rid of it, the prison, because it's so valuable for real estate, but they don't do it. And I know they have over 700 volunteers. I mean, people go in there to play tennis with them. Baseball teams go in and play baseball with them. They have a prison university project. They have veterans programs. They have a theater company that's sponsored by the Marin Shakespeare Company. And they have a paper that they put out that goes to all the prisons in California when they have to do, it's mentored by a local small paper, the Pacific Sun. But when they need to do online research, and you probably are aware that inmates can't get online. If they have to do online research, the journalism students at UC Berkeley do it for them, which I think is pretty cool. we have to get retrained every year. One of the things that's been really challenging for me, since I didn't know what I was doing, I just went in, um, and I didn't know what I would find. And what I found was about half a dozen guys, they had a 24-inch piece of cloth with a burn hole in it. They had one big white pillar candle. They had a wooden bowl, small wooden bowl, and a salt shaker. That's all they had. The reason they had the 24-inch square is because the Muslim inmates are entitled to a 24-inch square prayer mat, and anything one group of prisoners can have, the others can as well. So so our guys can have those if they want them. I meanwhile have gotten them a big altar cloth, and I could say tons of stuff about that, but I'm not going to waste your time here with that. But I'm going to ask you these questions that reflect some of the things I asked at the beginning, which is, should we be concerned about these needs? In terms of prisons in particular, I mean, we have people that, pagans, who say, I work in a prison, they are all nasty people, they deserve it, don't give them anything. And then people who want to go in and make them pagans, which is really awful to me too, even though the Christians and the Muslims do go in there with recruitment in mind and have a lot of programs for people who are seeking a spiritual path. We don't proselytize, and I feel really strongly about that. We're wide open, but we don't proselytize. So, are we obligated to fill these needs? Some people don't think we are. And if so, what ways can we meet them? What are the benefits and disadvantages of working with existing secular institutions? Existing secular institutions, for instance, one would be hospice, the hospice movement, um, even hospitals. We do have some presentations have been made in hospital chaplains. I had a student who made a big one at Johns Hopkins Medical Center, and I have helped make one here in Marin at the main hospital here. In this, back to prisons again, for whatever reason, I was invited a couple year and a half ago to address the chaplains for the state of California. The state of California has chaplains in a lot of different departments besides the DOCR, which is Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, but they have mental institutions, they have juvenile justice, veterans, I can't think of them all, but they have a whole lot of programs and departments who have one or more chaplains. And they have to have a CEU, continuing education, every year for a couple of days. So they asked me to speak about paganism, which I did. And this is a great story because a week afterwards, I get a phone call from the imam at Folsom State Prison. And he's got 6 members of the Folsom Wicked Circle on speakerphone looking for help. I don't know how to help them. I still haven't found anyone to go in there, even though it's close to Sacramento and there's a lot of people in Sacramento, a lot of pagans in Sacramento. We're not all drawn to that stuff. Again, it doesn't make you a better or worse, whatever kind of pagan you are, because you have some chaplaincy training, but it does prepare you for other kinds of jobs, roles within society. So who should meet these needs? What standards might apply, if any, and who establishes what they are and how they are complied with? Well, we're trying to do that with Cherry Hill. Again, I'm making a big pitch for Cherry Hill. We're close to getting accreditation, and with accreditation, people can get financial aid, for one thing. And we're on a par with the most stringent chaplaincy programs are the U.S. military. And the main place where they train military chaplains from all branches of the military is in Columbia, South Carolina, which happens to be where Cherry Hill Seminary is based. And the executive director has good relationships with those trainers. They have to have, in military, they have to have an MDiv before they can go into the program in the military. So they already have to have a degree from outside. Anyway, you have to develop a program. You have to have a library with a certain number of volumes. We have partnered with the new Alexandrian Library in Delaware for that. And we also have an online library that's less extensive. And you have to have a certain number of people who've been through the programs. You have to have the whole programs developed, which they are. And we're basically ready to roll in terms of applying for accreditation. We have most of the needs met, but it costs a lot of money. So just to file an application is $10,000. And when I hear people bitching about how much it costs for a $75 class or a $250 class for 15 weeks, that's pretty standard for a graduate program. But these people who teach, we have the best of the best, really incredible teachers. They spend 75 or more dollars per unit for the degrees they end up having. So they're not making any money when they teach at Cherry Hill. They're teaching because they love the pagan world and pagan community. So how can we cooperate and coordinate these services? I don't know. But I do think some things are forming. I would like to see a pagan prison chaplaincy group that has resources and you could talk to each other, because every state has different requirements and different limitations, and same with every all the federal prisons. It's a whole different system. So I've gotten several requests just because somebody knows that I've been to San Quentin for where can I find a volunteer. And I had one from a women's prison in Livermore, Dublin, California, which is, I don't know, 50 trafficy miles from here. I'm not willing to go. And it took me 2 years to find somebody to go in there, but I did find someone, and the request came from one of the counselors inside the prison. Also, the Napa State Hospital, which is a mental hospital, they had some inmates who wanted to start a Wiccan circle. And I went up there and consulted with them, gave them a lot of information because they have to do a whole big presentation to the authorities of why they need it and when, because they have allotment X number of hours in the chapel. We meet, the ones at San Quentin, we meet in a what used to be a storeroom. It's just a big empty, excuse me, white room that I trick out with banners to make it more temple-like. And we also have an outdoor space which we share with the Ifa practitioners and the Odinists. So we don't all use it at the same time. But we have 1 to 3 on every Saturday. They're allowed to use one or the other of those facilities without interruption. So that's the kind of stuff they need to prove, and if they're going to get it, if they're by any authorities. And this is what we like to do together, spiral dance in Modesto, California. That's it. So I'm sure I hope there are questions, and I'm not sure. I'm going to go to chat and see what's there. 5. Oh. Yeah, it's interesting. I gave a similar presentation at the last PantheaCon, and I was criticized by the owner that I didn't have the Gray School of Wizardry on there. But I didn't have it on there, among youth things, because I think I view that as a private business enterprise, which is different than a service one, or one that, and they do work with children, but it's somebody's gig. I don't know if that makes sense, but anyway. Does anybody want to say anything? Happy to hear from you. Know how to raise your hand in this thing?
I've asked everyone to unmute so that they can comment.
Thank you. This is what I was trying to do all along. Here. Is hide my messy room.
Babe, I've got them in my purse.
So the landscape of paganism has changed drastically in the last, since I was a kid, but since I was new. Everybody was in the broom closet. Now there's just books in every regular bookstore. So we're not responding to exactly the same set of circumstances. But I do think it behooves us to be prepared. And I think that the more we do along these lines, the less we leave it to anthropologists and sociologists and journalists to define who we are. To me, it's claiming who yourself is.
Can you outline for us what like a typical experience doing ministry work is like in the prisons?
In the prison? Yeah. Well, one of the things that was really challenging to me, because I mentioned earlier that now there's more people appearing in prison because there are more pagans in the population. There are more already pagans who are in the prison, but mostly they've not ever been exposed to it, and that it's changing. It's getting, if they have experience, they start their own group, like the Odinists there. And some white folks are in the Odinist group just for self-protection. They don't really care and they don't believe it, but they're there anyway. But most of the men who come regularly to our circle are men of color, which kind of surprised me because I consider that craft comes out of Western European thought. But I was trying to make it useful to them, relevant to who they are, to their lives. So we've done a lot of standard stuff. We can't have statuary. I really think visuals are an important part of learning. A lot of people learn much better visually. I suggest that people explore the idea of a patron or matron deity, one they would like to develop a personal, or already have, or would like to work on developing a personal relationship with. So I bring them a 8.5 by 11 picture in a plastic sheet protector of whatever deity they want, so they have something to hang in their room, in their cell, and to use for meditation and visualization. But we on the altar, I like pretty altars too. I just think it really makes a big difference in a room. Well, the first thing I did was I had a friend who was willing to support financially some of the stuff I'm doing. We don't have any formal organization and no formal funding. But I had a couple of angels who were volunteered to help pay for stuff. So when we were first setting up, one of the things I got was I got one of those banners with the 8 Sabbaths on it. You know those flags, like prayer flags? They hang from a string. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. I got one with the 8 Sabbaths and I got one with 5 elements, which I drape around the room, this white concrete block room with the white formica floor. Formica floor and linoleum floor. It's really boring. And we bought an altar cloth, and I believe, again, I think it's important to have something from each of the elements on an altar. So I brought in some feathers and an abalone shell and an amethyst crystal and an incense burner. Well, charcoal. For me to get supplies in there, it's a giant hassle. And it was a giant hassle to get these things approved, but they are approved. And one of the things I got was, those plexiglass display stands that you stick a piece of 8.5 by 11 paper in, like you see them on a sale counter or something.
Oh, like a
They're called displays, plexiglass displays,
yeah, like a shadow case, or
well, not exactly a shadow case. They stand up, and they're just plain plexiglass. You just slip in whatever piece of paper you want in it. So I have 2 vertical ones and 1 horizontal one, and I change them for every ritual depending on what deities we're working with, what holiday we're celebrating. So, for instance, on Imbolc, which I happen to consider the Feast of Bridget, and I call it Bridget, I have pictures of Bridget in all three of those stands. But one of the things I did is one of the things I have done in my own life is make new bridges crosses in sacred space each year. Well, obviously, I can't be bringing reeds into the prison. So I found a lot of pretty um, bridges crosses online. I printed them out, pretty good sized ones, and they're all different styles. And I cut everyone out, every teeny little piece I cut out so they looked just like they were real, except for they were two dimensional. And I laid them all on the altar for that ritual. And after it was over, people took them, were able to take them for their own personal use. And several of them have them hanging over the door of their cell for protection, which I think is way cool. So in that case, I was only working with one deity, a female. At Yule, for instance, again, trying to find something that's somehow identifiable for the men in this circle. I found a beautiful colloquy that Dave the Bard wrote about. It's a colloquy between the Oak King and the Holly King. So I had the Oak King in one of the uprights and the Holly King in the other, and a picture of them in a sword fight in the middle doing battle. And they read this colloquy to each other. Very beautiful. That was the heart of the ritual, was this colloquy. And they really liked it. So apparently, when I haven't been there on Yule, they've been still doing that, which I am happy about. So I've had to figure these things out. I am used to working with a very, you could call it the magpie tradition. I come out of reclaiming and fairy, but a lot of that is not scripted. And I found that in prisons, they need to be scripted down to every point. And stuff needs to be read. I've tried to encourage them to memorize some stuff, but I have to have a backup for them to read it. But then I discovered that some inmates really were challenged to read some of the invocations that were taped on the wall on the four side walls, which is what they had been doing before I got there. They had printed out invocations for each quarter, but they put on the wall and people read them. But some of the people couldn't read so well. So that was something I really had no idea even. I'm too bougie to have realized that. It makes perfect sense, but some of them are highly skilled. Some of them have really incredible meditation and visualization expertise because they have a lot of time to do it. And I mean, a guy who does heavy meditation every single morning, I can't do that, and I don't imagine most of you can either. So I did find that some people were very adept at some things, and some people it was completely new. But for the deities, I'm not back to the ritual again, but back to what I got for these men. I gave everybody the first thing I wanted to learn was a tree of life grounding meditation, because you can use it anywhere, and it really helps if you're particularly getting anxious. So I had a picture of it and a suggested words for when I gave them. So everybody has that. There's paper that you can buy that looks like a scroll. Just it's paper. I use some nice font and use that scroll, and I printed Charged Goddess on it. Give it to all of them. I have a God charge, same thing, on the Direction prayer, which I don't use, but a lot of people do. And I basically wanted them to, when they were released and found themselves in a Wiccan circle or some other kind of pagan scene, they would kind of be familiar with what's going on, and they wouldn't be so intimidated by the unfamiliarity, so that they would know some of these things. Because every coven that I know of uses a charge at some point. Not every time they meet, but it's pretty common. So I've tried to give them stuff like that. Some of them have been released. One of my favorites was released in. I thought I was going to see him not rehab, but halfway. But he got deported. So there's that problem. deportation. I have another one that got out, and he went to a Pasadena pagan meetup and told the woman who was running it to say hi to me. So at Pentecost, she did. I didn't know who she was. And I said, she said from Dave, and I said, what's his last name? She didn't know. So then she found out and she said who it was. I said, oh, tell him hi. It turns out, and I didn't want to say how I knew him because I didn't, first of all, I don't know what they're in there for. I do know a couple of the guys in that circle are murderers because it's come out in the context of meditative work. But I don't know what I don't know if there's child pornographers or predators or what. So I don't want to expose my community. I don't want to not expose. I want to protect my community. So I don't want to give them a recommendation from me, who's relatively well known, that it's okay, that these people are okay, if I don't know if they're okay, because I don't want to do that to my community. And on the other hand, I don't want to blow their chances because people tend to be discriminating against people with a prison record. So I don't want to blow their chances by saying I met them when they were in a circle at San Quentin. But it turned out that this guy actually did tell her that he met me in San Quentin. So that was kind of interesting. I've had a couple others like that. The population of the circle changes because people change. They do get harassed by a lot of the born-again Christians as they're like walking across the grounds to get to our meeting, which is upsetting, but it happens because a lot of Christians and others are narrow-minded. Anyway, so yeah, I do a basic regular circle with salt water and incense and the whole bit, purifications, grounding. And the incense, I got them a ton of incense and charcoal, but they went through it pretty darn fast. It turns out, I live in Marin, which is sort of the heart of white light world, white lightism. So there's a lot of sensitivity to aromas and stuff like that. And you can't, wear deodorant practically in a lot of places. These guys love incense, and I love it too. So we fill the room. The room is like your skies probably are right now, and like our skies are here. It's all smoky, and it's in their clothes, and it's in their hair. And one of our most primal senses is our sense of smell. And when they leave and, go about their business, their clothes and their hair still retain those scents. So whether they're conscious or not, they're still carrying whatever they got from the ritual in the scent that they have on their body. But they all love it. So that's why it's one of the few chances I have to just get real smoky with the incense. They're used to a lot of sage because the Native American group there gives them, because they grow some. They have a sacred garden, and they have a drum circle, and they have sweats, believe it or not. They have been the biggest allies for pagans generally across the board and across the country for allowances for pagan needs, or the Native American people. Like Native peoples can have a feather in their possession that's no longer than 17 inches. Not an eagle feather, obviously, but other kinds of feathers. So our guys can have feathers too that are that small. That's not too small anyway. So, I mean, that's just like they can have a little altar cloth because the Muslims have a prayer cloth. So I don't know if I'm telling you what you asked, but I'm trying to get them to do as much of the ritual as they can do themselves. And some of them step up and some of them really hold back. And as I said, mostly they're men of color, so have tried to make things relevant to them. I don't like with the thing with the Oak King and the Holly King, it's totally Western European, but it is at least, for want of a better word, honorable male figures because I, want to model the best. I have one black guy who's really, really into Bridget and another one who's into Cernunnos. So that's fine. They work with those too. But the other ones, a lot of the Hispanic guys end up working with Guadalupe. So I get them pictures of Guadalupe. I had a Thai guy, and I've got him a picture of My Thor and I. You probably never heard of her, but I heard of her. And My Thor and I is a Thai goddess who is pictured with her hair falling down, and she's washing her hair. She's washing all these blessings down on humans. But if you see statues of the Buddha in those countries, she is on the base, on the foundation. She's washing her hair. So I mean, it was Buddhism was placed on top, really on top of their reverence for the divine feminine, for want of a better explanation. Anyway, I got him My Thor and I. So I've been trying to do things, get them like I got a couple of black guys into Yamaya and Oshun, and that's fine. That's great. It's not strictly speaking craft, but you gotta work with what you have. I can't. I'm used to working skyclad for the most part. Obviously, that's not an option in prison. Um, I'm used to working mostly with women. That's not there, and I'm used to sharing a lot of intimate experience, and that's really I can't do that. You can't draw down. At least I can't. Maybe one of them can, but you have to keep a certain level of groundedness and awareness of your immediate surroundings that you don't always have to do if you're in a nice, safe circle with loved ones. So that was another thing, and anyway, now they all have copies now of the book that Ardentane made. The books that's on your libraries disappear. Either people take them and don't bring them back, or really conservative prison staff just destroy them, remove them and destroy them. Both of those things happen. So we have a little locker that we keep our supplies in. I mean, I added one of the things like at Samhain, those garlands, those crepe paper garlands. There's one that has skulls. It's white and orange and black, and it opens up, and I have another one at Yule with this green and red that I just put this garland around part of the room just to dress it up a little. It doesn't make the magic any better, but I think it makes them feel better for the care that's taken and the attention that's given. I have given them lots of, I don't know if there's a fellow, if you don't know him, you should be aware. His name is Stephen Posch, Posch, and he's a very accomplished man in Minneapolis. And he writes a blog, which is in Pagans. It's really, really outstanding. Always pithy, never more than 2 pages, usually less than that. Lots of stuff, and some of it's kind of heady and some of it not, but a lot of it's about God stuff or Johnny Deere, particularly horn God stuff. And he writes really righteous stuff that I think is useful to them. So I print those things up. I dress them up and turn them out. We have a binder of shadows that has the deities are all in slip sheets. The ones I told you, the pictures that we use on the altar, they're in plastic sheet protectors. But there's rituals in there, there's meditations, and there's stuff about certain herbs or whatever they're asking about, positions, like asanas. Lots of stuff is in there. Almost everything pretty much everything I've done. I've given them all very small prints, copies of A Grace, Holy Mother Earth, Grace, a grace that's from Church of All Worlds, so that they can bless their food if they want to. So I've tried to give them stuff they can take around. They're allowed to have, for instance, a symbol of their religion that's only an inch in diameter, like this. So they could conceivably wear pentacle if they wanted. Some of them do. They can't have anything big. They have cards. They can't have anything. All the books have to be paperback. They can't tell you how to make a bomb, and they can't have nude pictures in them. That's pretty much it. And they can't have writing in them like people annotated them when they had them. They can be used, but they can't be annotated. Oh, they're actually, for the library, they're supposed to be new. And they come directly from the approved vendor, which in our case is azuregreen.com in .net, Azure Green in Western Massachusetts. Wonderful people, very supportive of what we do. So good to give them your business if you can anyway, if you're buying stuff online. That's where I got the flags and stuff. So I got them this ton of incense, and then I wasn't able to go in for a while because I had a stroke a few years ago. They did healing work for me, bless their hearts, which was just really dear. When we use the outdoor space, we don't have the same kind of privacy. When they first showed me the outdoor space, I can stop talking about this anytime you want if you want to talk about other stuff. So just raise your hand if you do. But we worked a couple of years to try to get outdoor space because again, the Native Americans have that allowance, and we require it because we're nature worshipers, right? So we finally got one, and it was a flat, it was a rectangle surrounded by chain link fence, and it was just flat mud. That was the whole thing. It was very uninviting. So again, I said we shared it with the Odinist and the Ifa. So there's a little Ifa house there where the guys come in whenever they want to and do their ablutions for their ancestors. And there's what do they have? They now have a locker for the different groups, and they have 2 or 3 picnic tables and um, like a roof thing, shelter, because it's wicked sunny. Got a terrible sunburn there summer. We've been wanting to plant a tree. Father George, who was my sponsor, wanted to have a tree too, but we have to wait until the prison authorities rotate because they change the wardens pretty regularly. So we have to find one who's friendlier towards us. The people right next to us, the Native Americans, do have a tree and an herb garden and a big drum circle, those big drums they use. But we don't have a tree, and the guys were digging down to see what was down there, and it turns out they came to something. Excuse me, I don't know if it's concrete or what, but it's hard. It's not soil, so a tree probably wouldn't survive there anyway. But they have planted a lot around the edges as flowers and other nice shrubs. And what they did was they got them from other parts of the prison where there are plants that they can propagate from. So there's some alyssum, and there's some uh, lavender, a couple of succulents that are propagated from plants they find elsewhere on the site of the prison. I realized now, and one of the things I did, this was bad, I was a bad girl. I smuggled. They check you every time you go in. You sign up places and you wear a tag and you have a whistle on you at all times and all that sort of thing. I smuggled in a little packet of wildflower seeds for them to sow in their space. I don't know what the status of it is right now, if they took even, but I wanted to do that to just, make it more natural and prettier. So that's what they do. I think the reason they don't want a tree is because of visibility. I think the guards up in the towers can't tell what's going on underneath the trees. I don't know. That's just a guess. It might be just because they're cruel. I don't know. But anyway, I find it very satisfying. And they're very, very good. And everybody in the prison is grateful, not just the guys who come to that circle. I mean, I've been to some concerts and stuff in the yard, and they come up to me, all different ones come up and say, "Oh, thank you for coming. It's so wonderful you're volunteering." They don't know what I'm there for, but they know I'm an outsider. And I guess they do that with other volunteers too. We get retrained every year. So that's a lot about what I do at San Quentin. I'm sure that people do other things. My friend Patrick McCollum trains in the pagan sort of mindset, the state chaplains, that each state has a chaplain, through the AAR, American Academy of Religion, which is something I belong to as well. And he trains all the state chaplains. It doesn't mean it gets down to chaplains of individual institutions in whatever state, but the state chaplain as a whole, they're much more favorable to having volunteers from minority religions. minority in the sense of population, not in the sense of value. Um, and Patrick once, he took a maypole, if you can believe it, into one of the prisons. It was a women's prison. And it was a disarticulated, it was PVC pipe that, he could break down, into smaller chunks. So he could bring it in. It wasn't just like the big long pole. But he said they loved it. They loved it. And that was unusual that he was able to get one. So I talked to my guys about, what about having a maypole? Would you be interested? And one guy who's one of the main guys and who's a witch on the outside, he goes, it's a chick thing. I couldn't believe it. He says a chick thing to have a maypole. What can I say? I think that with a different configuration of people, that might be possible. It's a fun thing to do. Other people would see it. You can't. There's nothing to hate about a maypole. Although I have to say, a lot of second-wave feminist lesbians were pissed about because it's, it's representative of the penises going into the earth. That. Same with the cup and the chalice and the blade. They don't like that stuff. But mostly, maypoles are fun. And there's not much to be object to.
Well, thank you so much, Maka, for sharing all this information. Does anyone else have questions for Maka before we wrap up here?
It's pretty late, isn't it? You can always contact me. My email, I think, is on my website. And I'm on Facebook as Aline O'Brien.
All right. Well, thank you so much. That was really, really interesting. And I'm sure that we'll definitely be in touch to get more information about prison ministries and so on. It's really quite interesting.
Thanks for having me. I hope it stimulates a lot of thought. Not the prison thing, but the overall infrastructure.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Blessed be.
Blessed be.